Hello my friends and welcome. Today we have some of the interesting news. Ukraine went on a counterattack against the Russian forces right at the border between Kharkiv and Luhansk Oblast. We're speaking about many of the Ukrainian vehicles, probably tanks and infantry fighting vehicles. They went towards the Russian positions during the daytime, but under the cover of the artificial smoke. Well, actually this video is not that long. It was published by the Russian channels because it was filmed on the Russian drone. Yes, Russians know about the Ukrainian positions, about the Ukrainian attacks, because both of the sides, Russia and Ukraine, do have surveillance drone systems. But we can see that Russia used some sort of the artillery fire to hit Ukrainian vehicles, but they missed. And later on, the Ukrainian vehicles propelled a little further, capturing this local tree line. You know, guys, I haven't saw those kind of attacks from the Ukrainian side for a very long time. Well, usually Russia does the stuff, but without the smoke generation. Well, guys, I just hope that this attack was successful for Ukrainian side. If I know more information, I'll obviously update you. So it happened somewhere in this spot. I'm still trying to geolocate the area. It happened not far away from Novovodine, as it was reported, probably in those fields or those fields, because they were kind of the big fields with the long tree lines. And yes, we have the other confirmation from the different source that definitely it is not far away from Novovodine in those fields. Well, maybe the main objective for Ukraine was to get this forest under control. We have more explanation about the video of the Ukrainian forces attack. Definitely it was the attack performed by the Ukrainian tank brigade, 17th tank brigade of the Kryvyi Rih. Kryvyi Rih is the city located on the southern part of Ukraine, which suffers a lot under the Russian strikes. It's not been occupied, yes, but Russia launches lots of the stuff to hit Kryvyi Rih. There is also the video that I cannot publish on YouTube, but you may check it out on my Telegram channel. This is the Russian infantry forces advancement in the Kharkiv region. Somehow they want to renew their attack operations in Vovchansk. But the result of those attack operations from the Russian side is usually a total failure, like it was on this video. As you see, Ukraine uses the cluster shells to hit the Russian infantry. As we see, the video itself is published by the 3rd Assault Brigade. Also, there were some of the rumors spread mostly by the Russian propaganda that the 3rd Assault Brigade was ordered to go to Vuhledar to save the town, but they refused to go there because they were afraid of the heavy losses. But actually, guys, it's not true. The 3rd Assault Brigade is acting in the Kharkiv region for a very long time already. Now I'm sure that they haven't received that order. The order was for Ukrainian troops in Vuhledar to leave the town, but I would say that definitely that order was given too late. Yes, our guys left the trap, but it was done at the very last moment. And yes, one more fake or false from the Russian propaganda. They say that they encircled the city and encircled the Ukrainian group. That's what they say on their state TV. But even the Russian ad bloggers say that Ukrainians left the town on time. Well, Russians share those kind of the pictures saying that they were able to imprison the Ukrainians in Vuhledar, but actually those pictures are taken in the Kursk Oblast. During the Russian counteroffensive operation, they were able to capture some of the Ukrainians. Yes. Guys, if you want to support the job that I do daily on YouTube, you may join me on Patreon. The link for my Patreon page I'll put just in the video description below. Thank you so much for supporting my motivation. You really help me a lot because monetization on YouTube is damn strange. Speaking about Vovchansk, we also see how Russia is frustrated that they have to leave the city. Yes, they control the part of it, but still Ukraine regained the control over the most districts. So Russia, to stop this Ukrainian offensive, tries to use the aviation gliding bombs, and they use them unfortunately successfully. So after Ukraine liberated the local factory, Russia started to bomb it. And we have this video published by Russia. I'll show you just some of the screenshots. It's a big blast caused by the Russian gliding bomb. At first, some of the sources say that it was FAB 9000 because the devastation caused was tremendous, but actually it is the zoomed in image of FAB 3000 or even FAB 1500, which is much smaller compared to FAB 9000. The FAB 9000 is probably one of the strongest, one of the most powerful non-nuclear bombs, but even FAB 1500 is damn big. Well, Ukraine sometimes also use the gliding bombs, but JDAMs are more precise but much less powerful. That's how Russia actually reaches its goals, by demolishing Ukrainian positions, and later on they send mostly infantry forces, sometimes backed up by the tanks or infantry fighting vehicles, but Russia is now in lack of those tools. Yes, they produce the army vehicles, but not enough to compensate their losses. That's why mostly they use aviation gliding bombs and artillery, and lots of the infantry. country. Ukraine also uses the ASM-250, the French-made gliding bomb, which is very precise. Here you may see it under the MiG-29. But again, it's much less powerful compared to the Russian aviation gliding bombs. This video was filmed by the Russian soldier. Yes, it could be old, but I saw it today. So they drive the China-made golf cart somewhere on the front lines, and they film what is happening around, lots of the wreckage and so on. So it's very hard for them actually to move forward because the losses are damn heavy. And here's what they film afterwards. The drone hit the vehicle, but it just partially hit it. The vehicle is more or less okay. I mean, it's in a one piece, but they couldn't move with it because there was some of the problem with the engine. So they called for the evacuation, and while they were waiting, they were filming this stuff. Russia uses lots of those China-made vehicles. The official Russian media say that they've ordered around 2,000 of the units. Again, we see the signs that China helps Russia a lot with the drones, so with the supply vehicles. Here they use those vehicles for supplies, but there were some of the stories how Russia used those vehicles for attack. About the Kursk Oblast, there was one massive Russian aviation bomb strike, but probably on fertilizers. Some of those agricultural fertilizers could be really explosives, and it looks like that because we have this amber cloud. And you can see those clouds. I have already seen those kabooms in this war. Then Russia bombed the Ukrainian agricultural infrastructure. But somehow they do it now on the Russian territory. Magic. And this is also happening in the Kursk Oblast, some of the strike on the Russian military vehicles. Sorry guys, I cannot show you the full video, but believe me, it was definitely a kaput of the Russian army vehicles. Nevertheless, we have some of the update from the Kursk Oblast, so all of this gray area actually goes to the Russian control. It means that they intensify the strikes, or we have just a new update with the current information from the front lines. And also there is the update from Vesela village yesterday, today, just a clarification of the area. As we see, Vesela village is not yet under Ukrainian control because Russia concentrated lots of the resources there. As for the eastern front lines, there was no recent update by the time I'm recording this video, but I understand that Russians will focus on Selidova and also Kurakhove. And as you may see, Selidova is already partially encircled, yes, from this side. It's 100% that Russia will start a multi-vector attack on the settlement. As for Kurakhove, it's much harder for the Russian army because they may advance just from a single side because of this big water storage, basically the lake. There was the propaganda video published today of the Russian Sukhoi-25 attack airplanes, but something went not according to the plan. The Russian Z-blogger fighter bomber published this post saying that this airplane with the pilot is no more. Internal flight brother, usual wish from the Russian Z community. I wish all of the Russian military pilots could fly just internally like that. About the Vuhledar itself, well, this town is totally destroyed. Before the war, 14,000 people were living there. And in many of the useless attempts of the Russian army to get the city under control, they lost more troops than the population of this entire town. It was kind of the unique one with many of the several-story residential buildings, and for now, I think it's just useless to restore it. And you know, I still wonder why there are thousands of people who are still living in Pokrov city. I think that locals still do not understand the consequences of the Russian army and what the Ruski Mir might bring. Well, I understand partially why Ukrainians do not want to evacuate from the cities right at the front lines. Well, basically they don't have the way to go. There are no government programs for Ukrainian refugees. I mean the reliable government programs with enough funds for those families who lost their homes. That's why in most of the cases Ukrainians are moving somewhere abroad to Germany. Well, it is hard for Ukrainian men to leave Ukraine, but there are some of the way outs and families are just leaving Ukraine, and the population of Ukraine is declining dramatically. Ukraine is the country with the highest death rate in the world and also with the lowest birth rate. It means that this work just cannot continue for a long time, otherwise Ukraine will suffer significant devastation to its population. On this military map you may see the Russian territorial gains for the last year. Those are marked in red color. There are some of the territorial gains of Ukraine in the Kursk Oblast as well, but mainly here Ukraine stopped the assault operations. But Russia continued to attack, and for the last couple of months they gained more territories. The rate of their offensive actions increased dramatically, and we haven't seen those kind of the progress from the Russian side for a very long time, since their invasion of 2022. But still, the current rate is uncomparable to what was happening on the south, that Russia occupied the most part of the occupied territories in around 4 days. Well, mainly without any battles. It was a big mistake which is done by Ukrainian government, which is now in power. Well, nevertheless, we see that Russia broke through the Ukrainian defense in many of the points. We can clearly say it about Vuhledar, Pokrov's direction, and also the Kupiansk direction. Somehow Ukrainian army was able to stop the Russian assault on the northern part of Kharkiv. And judging on the size of Ukraine, Ukraine is the biggest country out there in Europe. And Russia occupied just a tiny piece of it for the last year. But guys, we also need to consider the losses of this war, because the front lines are boiling. Both of the sides have significant losses. As a new NATO secretary, Mark Rutte, said, Russian losses exceed 500,000 soldiers. We are saying about KA and wounded personnel. Yes, the losses for Russia are dramatic, but they have more human resources compared to Ukraine. If we take the standard ratio for losses in this war, Russia loses usually 3 times more compared to Ukraine: soldiers, equipment, everything. Well, in this case, Ukraine lost at least 160,000 soldiers, plus many more civilians, and we can definitely see it in Ukrainian cemeteries. Yeah, you may say that Ukraine still has millions of people, but for such a big country, Ukrainian population is quite low. And compared to Russia, it's low, so the thing is that Ukraine has no option rather than to defend itself. But Russia always have the option to retreat from Ukrainian territory, and that's how they may end this madness, but Putin will never do it, because he's just a crazy freak with his own ambitions, which are ruining not just Ukraine but also Russia itself. So how long this war could continue? Well, my forecast that for many more years, but we'll see how it goes, because there are lots of the pressure on Ukraine from allies that Ukraine should start negotiations, but Putin doesn't really want to stop this war after all. Guys, probably you remember this guy, Igor Strelkov-Girkin, yes, the Russian war criminal who is now in the Russian jail, but not for the war crimes. He's there for criticizing the Russian regime and the Russian army, and he continued to do it while his wife, he sends his messages, and his spouse publishes this information to everyone. So what did he publish recently? Well, it seems like Girkin believes in Ukraine more than some of our allies. He said that the military, economy and political crisis in Russia is imminent, and Russia is getting ready to repeat the events of 1917. Just to recall, the Bolsheviks took the power by the time, so communists. Russia has already entered this global crisis that will lead to a very devastating events for the country. Now Russia beats on Donald Trump, yes, that's what he said, but it is very risky and the probability of the Russian profit is very low. Russia can't replace the military losses. The ability to produce new weaponry are lower compared to the losses. All of the capable military equipment from the storages has already been taken, so there is no place where to get tanks, vehicles and so on. And it's not the first time that Strelkov is saying about it. Definitely there is the crisis inside Russia, and now Russia wants to take as much ground as possible just before election campaign. What adds into the Russian success on the east that there are some of the problems in Ukrainian army, and also, as I said to you, Russians managed to break through Ukrainian defense at many of the points. Ukraine wasn't really ready digging down reliable trenches to stop the Russian army, as Russians, for example, did on the southern part of Ukraine the last year. Then their trenches stopped Ukrainian counteroffensive. So we may say that the Russian army looks successful, their regime looks very solid, but it's just an illusion, as Girkin thinks, and I do think like that as well. If there is an event like Pergozhin's coup or something like that, we're gonna see the collapse of entire Russian regime. And I will record a separate video explaining you the entire situation in the Russian economy, in the Russian regime, and why do I think that finally Russia will collapse. I don't really want to speak about Middle East today. I guess you already understand what happened there. The Iranian attack basically failed. They hit mostly desert and a single poor Arab guy. I want to tell you about it in the context of this The Telegraph article. They asked the question of why Israeli air defense was breached by Iranian ballistic missiles, because before everything was alright, Israel defended the skies with the Iron Dome. Moreover, in a way they blame Ukraine and allies because they were concentrated in supplying the air defense systems to Ukraine, not the Israel. That's why Israel became weaker, and it's absolute bullshit. The thing is that the Iron Dome was made for the other purpose, to shut down the uncontrolled missiles launched, for example, from the Gaza Strip, but the big ballistic missiles are flying at a total different speed with a different trajectory, so Iron Dome is unable to intercept those in most of the cases. To properly intercept the ballistic missiles, you need Patriot systems, yes. Or the Soviet-made S-300 system or NASAM system with a shorter range compared to Patriot. But here we have the article dated from April this year. Patriot air defense to be mothballed, I hope I spelled that correctly, after decades of mostly gathering dust. It's about Israeli air defense Patriot systems. It means that Israeli didn't use those, but in fact they really need it. Also, there were many of the warnings this year that Ukraine hadn't obtained enough air defense systems to protect its main cities. Not even speaking about the front lines where the Russian army is successfully using the aviation gliding bombs. And we know that our allies have lots of those air defense systems, lots of the Patriot systems, which could be supplied not only for Ukraine, but also for Israel. The Israeli air defense systems could be maintained by Israel itself, yes, in the United States too. So the Telegraph article actually drives me mad. They are trying to accuse Ukraine for the wrongdoing or something. That Ukraine has enormous resources from our allies, but in fact Ukraine just has the partially needed resources to withstand against the Russian attacks, and we see how Russia takes the ground. Actually, yes. The Telegraph article smells like the Russian propaganda for me. Then they accuse Ukraine for some, like for example this mean North Carolina has been abandoned because all of the money is going to Ukraine. They mean the recent hurricane that caused the damages to North Carolina, and politicians always found the reason to argue between each other, and the Russian special services will obviously put their votes on that topic, dividing the American society and also separating the key allies like United States and Ukraine. Just for you to understand the military budget of the United States for a single year for 2024, it's 841 billion United States dollars. Ukraine has obtained this year not more than 20 billion United States dollars according to the recent military package. Yes, the 61 billion United States dollars are approved for the military package, but they will not be spent this year only. No, it's a long-term military support of Ukraine, so Ukraine obtains just a fraction, tiny little fraction of what the United States of America spends to maintain its largest army in the world. And here we see the real economy of the United States, I mean the economy sector as it is, not just military, 6.5 trillion United States dollars. But you know, uneducated people would believe that the entire United States economy is spent for Ukraine. For this reason, the United States is unable to fight against hurricanes which are caused by nature. They will always bring devastations no matter what. You cannot handle the weather at this time of evolution. The IDF army breached one of the tunnels of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and they uncovered the Russian weaponry, which Hezbollah stored in the tunnels. It means that Russia directly supplied the terrorist group of Hezbollah. Plus, obviously, IDF found the Iranian-made weaponry. The action I think that Ukraine also should do against this useless organization of United Nations and the leader of organization, Antonio Guterres. Well, Israel banned him from entering the country, declaring Antonio as a persona non grata. Israel did it because Guterres hadn't condemned the attack on Israel. Well, after all, I think that the United Nations organizations felt like its ancestor League of Nations. It doesn't correspond to the reality to all of those dictatorship countries like Russia or even China, North Korea, which could start the Third World War, and it will be the end of the United Nations. Well, actually, the modern-day security is not working as it is, and by the way, President Macron also said about it. What this organization does, it consumes lots of the money. And you know what? As usual, United Nations has no funds to help Ukrainians who fled frontline areas through this winter. They have just enough funds for themselves. And even the Soviet Union was expelled from League of Nations after they started the Second World War on the side of Nazi Germany from occupation of Poland. Well, Germany withdrew itself from League of Nations and the Soviet Union was just kicked. But here Russia started the war against the other country, Ukraine, a biggest war since the Second World War, and Russia feels totally fine in United Nations. They have veto, they have all of the rights, and they use the United Nations as their propaganda platform. And this stuff is also supported by China. So if this organization is useless, why should we keep it? My friends, I'm gonna keep you updated on the situation in Ukraine. For now, please don't forget to press your huge like to this video. By doing so, you help me a lot, and as usual, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.